They say power in America wears a suit. They say money leaves no fingerprints. But on Wall Street, there was a time when neither of those things were entirely true, because behind the glass towers, the polished marble, the roaring trading floors, and the illusion of order, there was another force. A force older than the banking system, colder than corporate law, more disciplined than any regulator. A network built on silence, a code written in blood and honor, an empire that operated without flags, borders, or uniforms, yet held enough influence to tilt markets, erase debts, and determine who rose and who was quietly buried. This is not the story of criminals invading Wall Street. It's the story of Wall Street opening the door. This is history's wealth, where money tells the story of power. Before Wall Street became the center of American financial power, it was nothing more than a narrow street beside a wooden barrier, a place where merchants gathered, where trades were made by handshake, and where law always arrived a step too late. New York was growing too fast for its own good. Ships unloaded thousands of immigrants onto streets that barely had names. The city pulsed with opportunity, desperation, ambition, and danger. And in places like that, hidden empires find oxygen. Among the waves of newcomers were Sicilians fleeing drought, vendettas, and poverty. They arrived with little more than their skills, their loyalties, and a way of organizing power that didn't rely on governments, but on people. At first, they weren't interested in finance. They lived the way they had survived back home, controlling neighborhoods, settling disputes, and offering protection where the law was weak or corrupt. But something unexpected happened. As New York industrialized, the city's shadows expanded with it. Police officers took bribes, politicians bought votes, bankers pushed the limits of legality to keep up with the boom. In a city full of cracks, someone always sees the value of slipping through them. By the late 19th century, Wall Street was rising quickly, faster than regulators, journalists, or lawmakers could keep up. And where there is money, there is leverage. Where there is leverage, there is need. And where there is need, someone always supplies it. Stockbrokers addicted to gambling, politicians drowning in campaign debts, businessmen desperate for loans banks refused to give, union workers demanding protection, dock workers who needed someone to watch their backs. Every corner of New York had someone looking for a favor, and favors, unlike dollars, are never paid back voluntarily. During Prohibition, everything changed. When alcohol became illegal in 1920, two worlds collided, one built on law, one built on profit, and profit won by a landslide. Bootlegging created a river of cash so large that even the banks struggled to understand the flow. Millions moved through hidden tunnels, speakeasies, supply routes, trucks, ports, and backrooms, and every one of those dollars needed to be cleaned. This was when Wall Street met organized crime not as enemies but as partners. Bankers suddenly discovered something unusual. These groups had liquidity, serious liquidity. They had cash, discipline, consistency, and an absolute commitment to secrecy. Meanwhile, the families discovered something even more valuable. Wall Street didn't just offer legitimacy, it offered invisibility. Money moved through shell companies in Delaware, through real estate deals in Manhattan, through import-export firms with ambiguous books, through construction loans that somehow never needed to finish the building. Wall Street had the tools. Organized groups had the money, and America had the perfect cover: rapid growth. By the time Prohibition ended, the relationship wasn't temporary, it was structural. Two empires had merged in silence, one built on backroom loyalty, the other on polished legitimacy, and together they built something neither could build alone: a hidden financial empire. By the 1950s, America was living in the glow of a new golden age. War was over, the suburbs expanded, Wall Street climbed higher and higher, but beneath the optimism was a truth few dared to confront. Money had become the perfect disguise. Banks expanded interstate, financial instruments grew more complex, regulation lagged behind innovation, and Wall Street trusted growth far more than transparency. In this environment, organized groups didn't need to be violent anymore. Violence was noisy. Violence made headlines. Violence left trails. Real power was quiet. And so they evolved. Instead of enforcing territory, they bought into accounting firms. Instead of bribing policemen, they funded brokers drowning in gambling losses. Instead of threatening local businesses, they offered silent partnerships, loans with no paperwork and no questions asked. Wall Street didn't resist. It adapted. Because the financial world had discovered a truth that these groups had mastered decades earlier: power expands through convenience. If a broker could save a client by moving money quickly, he did. If a bank could fill a liquidity gap, it did. If a politician could secure quiet funding, he accepted it. And each time someone chose convenience over caution, the threads tightened. This wasn't crime infiltrating finance. It was mutual evolution. Real estate became one of the cleanest pipelines. Construction firms, many controlled by the same networks, won contracts for skyscrapers, highways, tunnels, and bridges. Funds flowed from city budgets to contractors, from contractors to subcontractors, and from there to places regulators never saw. The unions controlling concrete, trucking, garbage disposal, shipping, and ports became another artery. They were legitimate. They had votes, they had political influence, and they controlled the literal backbone of New York's infrastructure. Wall Street needed assets. These groups needed legitimacy. The arrangement was silent, simple, and effective. They provided capital. Wall Street provided invisibility. By the 1970s and 80s, deregulation accelerated the integration even further. High-risk loans, unions with billion-dollar pension funds, construction conglomerates, import-export companies moving containers no one inspected, real estate fronts purchasing entire city blocks. A Senate investigation in the 1980s tried and failed to reveal the financial underworld. They subpoenaed records, interviewed insiders, tracked transactions, but all they found were immaculate books. A senator asked, "Where is the crime?" A banker replied quietly, "You're looking at it." Crime stopped being visible, because by then, assimilation was complete. Old world groups didn't control Wall Street. They didn't need to. They were dissolved inside it, like ink in water, and the empire they helped create had grown far beyond them. The early 2000s introduced something neither side expected, a financial system too complex for anyone to control. Money moved through algorithms, offshore arbitrage, credit derivatives, electronic markets, a global web spinning faster than any human network. Loyalty meant nothing in a world run by servers. Intimidation meant nothing in a world run by algorithms. The 2008 crisis delivered the final blow. Front companies collapsed. Silent partnerships evaporated. Real estate empires turned to dust. Capital pipelines dried up instantly. A former FBI analyst said, "The AFO crash hurt Wall Street, but it erased the shadows tied to it." And yet, the methods remained. Because while the old families faded, their systems did not. Shell companies, layered transactions, proxy owners, offshore structures, consulting fees masking transfers, front entities entangled across multiple jurisdictions. Wall Street didn't inherit the crime, it inherited the architecture, and that architecture lives on inside private equity, multinational corporations, hedge funds, political campaigns. Global real estate giants' crime didn't infiltrate finance. Finance institutionalized crime's techniques. Today, investigators no longer talk about families. They talk about structures. Because the power that once lived in alleyways now lives in spreadsheets and offshore trusts, the shadows didn't disappear. They changed shape. They became corporate. And the empire built in silence now stretches across continents, wrapped in legality, compliance, and polished language, hidden in plain sight. In the end, the real story isn't about criminals lurking behind Wall Street, it's about the structures they left behind. Structures so effective that modern finance still runs on versions of them today. Some empires rise through innovation, others through legislation, and a few through the kind of silence that bends systems without ever revealing itself. If you want to understand the forces that shape the financial world, the visible and the invisible, subscribe to History's Wealth, because the alliances built in darkness last longer than most people realize, because in the end, history doesn't repeat itself. It teaches, and those who listen survive.